you pray for me and my back spasm problem. It's really been giving me a fix. And I need to go away.
Okay.
Pray for Addie to get better.
All right, let's pray. Father God, we do thank you for our time of fellowship. Thank you now for this time that we have to gather together here and just go over the videos that we'll be talking about today of learning about the truth of our foundation of our country. And thank you for the opportunities that we have to come to you now in prayer. And I want to lift up praise to you for Judy being back with us. They're down there for fellowship and that she is feeling better. And thank you for the outlook of the doctors as far as the success of this procedure, and give you credit, glory for that. Pray for Derek and his back spasms, that he would help him to get over those, whether it needs medical attention or what the situation is, that he would be able to find relief. If it's pulled muscle, that in time that things will get back to normal. We pray for this Sunday where those who have been on the Hope trip will be sharing and just talking about all the things in which you've done through that ministry this year, and then for the next group to go, that they would have a great time as well. And we also pray for Addie to be feeling better and to get over her sickness and illness, and that she can be back normal again as far as feeling well and be back with us as well. So now as we look into this study, we just thank you for your Holy Spirit being with us. May he lead, guide, and direct in everything that is said and done. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Talked to a couple of you already. If we keep going at the pace we're going with this, it's going to be like a 24... You're coming to join us? Well, thank you. It is going to end up being like a 24-week study, which I think is very, very much too long. And seeing how nobody likes to talk much afterwards about this, what we're looking into doing is after this week, we'll be back on the same disc, and so we're looking at showing both of the parts together on the same night, and then that will be about 9 more weeks that we'll have to do this. So the only other course to do is to go a couple more of them and then stop for a while and come back, but I don't think that's really the thing to do either. So that's what we'll look into doing after this one. We're going to show this one of part 2, and then after this, like I said, everything will be on the same disc. And then I have another thing that I want us to watch, and it just might generate some discussion. Miraculously, somehow, discussion just might be had after we get done with this next one. So, all right. You can go ahead and skip over all the of this advertisement stuff.
Founding fathers were a diverse group of atheists, deists, and political revolutionaries. What role, if any, did their religious faith play in the founding of the American government? Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage series. America, this is your heritage.
We have over 200 individuals that we call founding fathers.
Overwhelmingly, they were Christian. Probably 95% of that group were Christians. The signers of the Declaration, signers of the Constitution, etc. Today we hear about those who weren't Christian and think that's who they all were. But those that were Christians, and that's again overwhelmingly 95% of them, they were not only active in their own faith, they were active in helping spread that faith to others. They saw the Bible as the basis of so many of their ideas. So many of those ideas were incorporated into their documents. That's clear in their writings, it's clear in the books they used. But they also wanted others to know those same biblical ideas. God was so important to the Founding Fathers that when they met in Congress for the first time in September of 1774, they opened with prayer. But apparently it was not a routine, genteel little prayer like we might pray at a public meeting today. No, according to the writings of those who were there, that time of prayer in Congress was momentous as well as extended. In fact, according to John Adams, Congress not only prayed, but the delegates also studied 4 chapters of the Bible in Congress. That Bible study was so timely and had such a profound effect upon the delegates that John Adams wrote a letter to his wife Abigail telling her,
I never saw a greater effect upon an audience. It seemed as if heaven had ordained that psalm to be read on the morning. I must beg you to read that psalm. Read this letter and the 35th psalm to your friends. Read it to your father.
by the way, her father was the Reverend William Smith, the pastor of their local church. Silas Dean said this time of prayer and scripture reading in Congress was so powerful that, quote, even the Quakers shed tears. There's no doubt that America has been a successful nation with a stable, successful government because of the foundation on which it was built. A foundation unlike any other nation in the world. In fact, George Washington, in his famous farewell address of 1796, reminded us why our government and its policies were so successful. He declared,
of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports.
so what you find really intriguing is that when you look, for example, at the first National Bible Society formed in America, the American Bible Society, this little jewel right there, that's their first constitution. You see who the officers are that formed the first Bible Society in America. They're all founding fathers. And as you go down the list, and you look at the Elias Boudinot's, and you look at the John Jays, and you look at signers of the Constitution like John Langdon and Charles Coatsworth Pinckney and Caleb Strong, who helped frame the Constitution, all these guys, what's striking is on all the officers of the American Bible Society, there's not a preacher among them. Every one of these guys, there were Supreme Court justices, there were military leaders, signers of the Constitution, governors. I mean, it was all these other... Now, we would expect today a Bible society to be started by a bunch of preachers. Not back then. It was started by all these civil leaders. This signer of the Constitution is Charles Coatsworth Pinckney, and this one is John Langdon. Interestingly, there's a strong connection between these two signers and the landmark Promise Keepers rally, which took place here on the National Mall outside the Capitol. The Promise Keepers rally, a gathering of between 1 and 2 million men dedicated to being godly influences in their family and their world, has been described by official observers as the largest gathering ever to occur in Washington, D.C. The American Bible Society prepared 1 million copies of this special commemorative edition of the Bible for that rally, and those million Bibles went quickly. Of course, it's nothing for the American Bible Society to distribute 1 million Bibles in one day, for they distribute upwards of 200 million Bibles in a single year. However, what many may not recognize is that the American Bible Society was the same American Bible Society founded 2 centuries ago with the help of Charles Coatsworth Pinckney and John Langdon. Here is the original Constitution of the American Bible Society, and the list of its founders is quite impressive. Its first president was the Honorable Elias Boudinot. Elias Boudinot had served as the president of the Continental Congress, had signed the final peace treaty with Great Britain to end the Revolution, and had helped frame the Bill of Rights. Incidentally, Elias Boudinot also authored this book. It's called The Age of Revelation. It's a complete biblical refutation of Thomas Paine's anti-religious work, The Age of Reason. The vice presidents of the American Bible Society, in addition to John Langdon and Charles Coatsworth Pinckney, the signers of the Constitution already mentioned, also included several Supreme Court justices. Justice John Jay, the original Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and one of the 3 authors of the Federalist Papers. Justice Bushrod Washington, and Justice Smith Thompson, also a Secretary of the Navy, and Justice John Marshall, an officer on George Washington's staff during the Revolution, a Secretary of State under President John Adams, and the 4th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, also became a later Vice President of the American Bible Society. Other founding Vice Presidents of the American Bible Society included numerous governors and state leaders, such as Caleb Strong, Governor of Massachusetts and a delegate to the Constitutional Convention, William Gray, Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts, John Cotton Smith, Governor of Connecticut, Jonas Galusha, Governor of Vermont, William Jones, Governor of Rhode Island, Isaac Shelby, Governor of Kentucky, George Madison, a later elected Governor of Kentucky, Thomas Worthington, Governor of Ohio, Thomas Posey, Governor of Indiana, James Brown, U.S. Senator from Louisiana, William Tillman, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, William Gaston, Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and Richard Barrett, the Attorney General and the Speaker of the House of New York, became the original treasurer of the American Bible Society. Also included as original founders of the American Bible Society were Felix Grundy, who served as the U.S. Attorney General under President Martin Van Buren, William Wirt, who served as the U.S. Attorney General under Presidents James Monroe and John Quincy Adams, Matthew Clarkson, a Major General during the American Revolution, and you can go right on through the list. The original founders of the American Bible Society were a veritable who's who of American political founders.
In the classroom of our nation's history, Americans are increasingly taught opposing views of founding presidents, such as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Were our nation's founders truly men of moral and religious character? And what role, if any, did their religious faith play in the founding of the American government? Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage series. America, this is your heritage.
The first Bible Society started in America was also started by founding fathers. It was the Philadelphia Bible Society. Now, that particular Bible Society was started by signer of the Declaration, Benjamin Rush. That's 1809. So he starts this Bible Society. They get it off the ground. They get Bibles distributed and printed. Every American, they want to have a Bible. Founding father. And the other guys say, you know, that's really a pretty good idea, have a Bible Society. So the other framers started jumping on that bandwagon of starting Bible societies. Between 1809, when the Philadelphia Bible Society was formed, and 1816, when the American Bible Society was formed, there were 121 different Bible societies formed in America. So here's the New Jersey Bible Society. Signers, founding fathers did that. Here's the Massachusetts Bible Society. Our founding fathers did that one. Here's the New York Bible Society. You go through state after state after state. Matter of fact, you get back here and you find the Virginia Bible Society. Now, what makes that one particularly interesting is Thomas Jefferson was one of the founders of the Virginia Bible Society. Oh no, not Jefferson, he's secular. He wanted, yeah, exactly. See, Jefferson founded the Bible Society. He gave large contributions to help get the Bible out to every American.
So when you go back to the original documents, when you go back to the original writings of the founding fathers, the roughly 250, founding fathers, they do things like form Bible societies.
That's right. And again, these aren't preachers we're talking about.
Right.
I mean, these are political leaders forming Bible societies. And I have to stop on Jefferson for just a minute, because when you say Jefferson Bible, people say, I've heard of the Jefferson Bible. Oh yeah, that's where he cut out everything he disagreed with. He was so anti-Christian, so anti-Bible, he cut it all out. Well, temporary timeout. If he's so close to the Bible, why is he one of the founders of a society that promotes the entire Bible? I mean, if the Jefferson Bible charge is right, that Jefferson cut out parts of the Bible with which he disagreed, then why would he fund and contribute to and help run a society that gives out all the scriptures unedited? That's inconsistent. What happens is, this little document here is what's called the Jefferson Bible. We call this the Jefferson Bible, and in the last 30 years, people have consistently said this is the scriptures, but Jefferson cut out everything with which he disagreed. Well, if you go to the front of this work, it doesn't have the title Jefferson Bible. And if you use that title with him, they'd probably have punched you out for saying it. The title he gave it is The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth.
Oh my God.
What he did was he went through and cut out all the red letters of Jesus, pasted them end to end, so he could read the red letters of Jesus without stopping. It's not what he cut out, it's what he put in. But why did he do that? He tells us, and he did this twice. He did it in 1804, he did it again in 1819. He said that he did this to be a missionary tool to help evangelize the Indians. He said, because if we can get them to read the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, it'll change their life. So this was not a work that he turned and cut out everything he disagreed with. It's a work where he took all the words of Jesus and put them there so you could read the words of Jesus nonstop. And he did that as a missionary tool for the Indians. These 4 paintings move us forward some 150 years in America's history, close to the time when Washington, D.C. was planned and the Capitol was constructed. Interestingly, these 4 paintings were painted by one of our founding fathers. They're the work of John Trumbull, called the Painter of the Revolution. John Trumbull served as an officer during the American Revolution, and what makes Trumbull's paintings so meaningful is that he personally witnessed much of what he painted, and he personally knew many of those that he painted in these pictures. Because of John Trumbull's commitment to artistic accuracy, the faces in these paintings are probably about as close as we'll ever get to having photographs of our founding fathers. John Trumbull came from a family of outspoken Christians, and the other members of this family are honored here at the Capitol, as we will soon see. In fact, as an indication of the strong faith of this family, I hold here one of several proclamations issued by his brother, Jonathan. Jonathan also served as an officer. He was an officer on George Washington's staff during the Revolution. Here's Colonel Trumbull himself, seated with the officers at the surrender of Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown. After the Revolution, Jonathan became governor of Connecticut, and this proclamation, issued while he was governor, calls the entire state to a day of prayer and thanksgiving. As you can see, the language is strongly evangelical. Trumbull issued several such proclamations, but this is no surprise, for these proclamations reflect the very nature of Jonathan Trumbull. In fact, Jonathan Trumbull was only one of an overwhelming majority of our founding fathers and early leaders who were strongly and openly religious. In this, the House Connecting Corridor, just outside National Statuary Hall, you'll find additional statues, including this one of Jonathan Trumbull, the only governor of the 13 states to serve in that capacity throughout the entire Revolution. He probably did more than any single individual to supply men, munitions, and materials to General George Washington. In fact, he became one of Washington's closest friends and confidants, and Washington called him Brother Jonathan. In his hand, you see him holding the letter of resignation which he sent to the state legislature in October 1783. In that letter, he explains that after 14 years of leading the state, including through 8 years of war, the state is now safe and he's therefore ready to retire. At age 73, he wanted to return to his ministerial studies.
On my advanced stage of life, a life worn out almost from the constant cares of office, I think it is my duty to retire from the busy concern of public affairs, that at the evening of my days, I may sweeten their decline by devoting myself with less avocation and more attention to the duties of religion, the service of my God, and preparation for a future and happier state of experience, in which pleasing employment I shall not cease to remember my country, and to make it my ardent prayer that heaven will not fail to bless her with its choicest favors.
Jonathan Trumbull is another one of our many American patriots and heroes who is honored with a statue here at the Capitol and who is also a minister of the gospel.
It's almost safe to say that everything that I would have learned in school in American history has been filtered before it got to me. And when did that start happening?
American history has been filtered to remove religious and moral history, traditional values, patriotism. A lot of that is gone. We've turned American history into a victim history. We start finding people that are victims, that were mistreated, and that did happen. But that, again, was the exception rather than the rule. Even though it happened to people groups, it still was not what dominated the entire span of 4 centuries of American history. What ended those atrocities were religious folks getting involved, were preachers getting involved, were churches getting involved. We don't talk about that. I guarantee you in our American history textbooks, we will all learn about the Salem witch trials where 21 were put to death by those religious Puritans in Massachusetts. What we will not learn about is the abolition movement that was started by ministers. We won't learn about the first, second, third Great Awakenings. We will learn about none of the 6 religious revivals. We will also not learn about the fact that even when 21 were put to death in New England for the witch trials, in Europe, in that time, in the witch trials in Europe, over 500,000 were put to death in Europe. We will also not study the fact that the witch trials in America were brought to an end when 2 preachers of the gospel went to the civil leaders and said, this is wrong. What you're doing is wrong and needs to stop. So it's preachers that brought the witch trial to an end in America. On top of that, the judge who was in charge of the witch trials went into church and repented openly and renounced what he had done and said, I was misled, I was misunderstood, this is not what God wanted. See, what we do in American history is we show the bad side, but we don't show the other side that's there. And so what we've learned in American history is really a rewritten history. It's not reflective of what actually happened. Well, it is reflective of incidents that happened, but it's not reflective of the tone that happened, particularly when it comes to traditional religious and moral values, when it comes to elements of patriotism, when it comes to elements of inclusion, when it comes to Black history.
In the classroom of our nation's history, Americans are increasingly taught opposing views of founding presidents, such as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Were our nation's founders truly men of moral and religious character? And what role, if any, did their religious faith play in the founding of the American government? Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage series. America, this is your heritage.
In our current textbooks, we think Black history started with Martin Luther King Jr., and that's a great place to cover. But you have to go all the way back 300 years earlier to start Black history, because there are a number of Black patriots in America that are really cool guys. The Reverend John Morant, most people have never heard of him. Harry Hoosier. Who started Harry Hoosier? Well, they've heard of the Hoosiers of Indiana, but somebody forgot to tell them that Harry Hoosier was a Black preacher in the First Great Awakening that drew larger crowds than any of the ministers in the Great Awakening. See, there is so much we don't hear in all aspects of our, and we leave out folks that have religious faith. We leave out folks that have traditional moral values, and we get into a real secular economic view of history, and we miss so much of what happens.
It's almost 180 degrees wrong.
Well, it is, and it particularly is with founding fathers, because founding fathers are so important to current policy.
Right.
Every time we go into a courtroom, we're arguing about what the founding fathers wanted. Well, if current history can show that they're all atheists and agnostics and deists, then it's real easy for that judge to say, you know, these guys would not have wanted religious expressions going on. But that's bad history. And see, that's what these Bible societies show. Our founding fathers who signed the documents were the guys who were promoting the Bible. Matter of fact, this little book right here would be a fun read for anyone today. It's written by a President of the United States who was a founding father, John Quincy Adams. And here's a little piece of trivia on John Quincy Adams. His father, signer of the Declaration, John Quincy grew up in the American Revolution when he was 8 years old. He had his musket out with the Massachusetts Minutemen at the age of 8. He's already in favor of supporting his country. He goes on to become a diplomat under George Washington. George Washington called the young John Quincy Adams the most effective American diplomat we had. John Quincy Adams got appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. He was confirmed by the Senate. He was not even the nation when it happened. He was ambassador overseas, and he turned down the appointment. He'd already been confirmed with the Supreme Court. So he's a huge Supreme Court figure. He's a great legal figure. But this is a book that he did for 10-year-old young people, showing them how to read through the Bible from cover to cover once every year.
Oh my goodness.
Now, what happens today if a president does a book for 10-year-olds showing them how to read the Bible cover to cover? No, you can't. That's unconstitutional. Wait a minute. This is one of the guys who fought for the nation, who helped birth the nation, who was there from the very beginning, doing this for 10-year-olds. See, they understood the Bible was the source of our ideas.
Right.
And if we lost those biblical concepts, we lose inalienable rights. We lose separation of powers out of Jeremiah 17:9. We lose checks and balances. We lose the consent of the government. We lose all these things that they took out of the Bible, teachings of the Bible, and placed into our documents. They wanted the Bible taught. The other thing I find really interesting with these guys, living in our modern society, we all write wills. We're taught to write wills so that we leave things to our children, and so the state doesn't get all of our possessions when we die. Everyone's supposed to have a will. They're called last wills and testaments. We don't do that. Founding fathers did. It was last will and testament. In those documents, they proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. These documents are read to the entire family. And for example, Patrick Henry in his will, he goes through, he gives away everything to his children. At the end of his will, he says, this is all I can leave my children, but the inheritance of Jesus Christ is what will make them rich. And he goes into this thing about how what they need more than anything he gave them is what Jesus can give them. You also have Richard Stockton, who was a signer of the Declaration, who was in prison, made a prisoner of war. He died as a result of the way the British treated him. And he knew his young kids would never grow up to know their father. So in his last will and testament, he goes through the entire plan of salvation, every major Christian doctrine, because he says, I know that you're going to be reading this, and you need to know what your father believes. And he went through and laid out the whole gospel. This is a signer of the Declaration. If you look at their wills, their last will and testament, they get up on their soapboxes and they preach. They preach to their family. They preach to anybody who's going to read that will. And that will then goes into the courthouse where it's a legal document that will be examined for generations afterwards. And it has the testimony of Jesus Christ throughout. Here is Ethan Allen. Allen was an officer in the American Revolution and became famous for the capture of the British stronghold of Ticonderoga in 1775. Even though the Declaration of Independence was not signed until 1776, the next year, Great Britain had already been warring against her American colonies. In 1774, she had laid siege to Boston and erected a naval blockade. The battles of Charleston, Breeds or Bunker Hill, and Lexington and Concord followed soon thereafter, all long before the Declaration of Independence was signed. As the conflict spread from Massachusetts onto Virginia and other areas, Connecticut began to fear for her own safety. Connecticut therefore secretly contacted Ethan Allen and requested that he capture Fort Ticonderoga. Even though Ticonderoga was still far away from the scene of any military activity at that time, it was hoped that by this action, the British would be forced to pull troops away from their offensive actions against the Americans in order to defend their own forts. Ethan Allen gathered his Vermont Green Mountain boys. They surrounded the unsuspecting British and captured the guards. Having secured the perimeter of the fort, Ethan Allen, in his own words, in his own autobiography, told what happened next.
One of the sentries made a pass at one of my officers with a charged bayonet. My first thought was to kill him with my sword, but in an instant, I altered the design and fury of the blow to a cut under the head, upon which he dropped his gun and asked quarter, which I readily granted him, and demanded of him the place where the commanding officer kept. He showed me a pair of stairs in front of the barrack on the west part of the garrison, which led up to a second story in said barrack, to which I immediately repaired, and ordered the commander, Captain de la Place, to come forth instantly.
Captain! Captain! Come forth now or sacrifice the garrison.
At which the captain came immediately to the door.
What in the devil is this? Deliver your fort at once, sir, or risk your garrison. On what authority do you make this pass? In the name of the great Jehovah
In the Continental Congress, and with my drawn sword, again demanded an immediate surrender of the garrison, with which he then complied.
In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress. It was this phrase and the capture of Fort Ticonderoga which earned Ethan Allen this place in Statuary Hall.
You're going back to the original text. You're going back to original documents. This is irrefutable.
Yeah.
Well, it's irrefutable, kind of. It's irrefutable as long as you're willing to look at the truth. There was a Supreme Court case in which we were involved, where we get involved in Supreme Court cases with historical documents, because as the issues are argued in front of the court, you have historical issues. You say, here's the original documents of the guy who wrote that clause in the Constitution. Here's what he said. Or here's the original documents of the first law passed on that clause. So you can show originals. We did that in one of the cases where in the briefs that you have to present to the court, you show the documents, you go through the argumentation. One of the Supreme Court justices dealt with our arguments that we had given, historical arguments. And the issue was whether you could have a prayer at a graduation. Now you have to understand that's not a new thing for the Founding Fathers. The first public school law passed in America was 1647. So public schools were 120 years old at the time of the Founding Fathers. So now we have an issue before the court that can you have a prayer at a graduation? Well, we can go back and show signers of the U.S. Constitution that gave prayers at graduations in public schools in their day. And so we go through that, and we go through all the historical document. And so this justice noted, he said, well, that kind of proves the Founding Fathers were not opposed to school prayer. They condoned it. They even advocated it. But he said that proves one of two things about the Founding Fathers. He said it proves either, first of all, they were hypocrites because they knew it was wrong to pray in public and they went ahead and did it anyway. He said it just proves they didn't understand the Constitution. You're going, really? The guys who wrote it. So what you get is you get a worldview conflict at times where people don't want truth. They don't want to know truth. But most people, 90%, want to know the truth. It does affect the way they behave. They want to do the right thing. They've just been taught wrong information.
For more information on the American Heritage Series, or to find books and other resources, visit wallbuilders.com. Through the American Heritage Series, renowned historian David Barton communicates our nation's forgotten, godly foundation.
Go ahead and get the other one geared up and ready. All right. Pretty interesting that the Founding Fathers didn't realize what was in the Constitution. Haven't heard that one for a while. Listening to this, I had this thought. What do you think that people in Vermont, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island would think if they knew that their founding governors were an American Bible Society? I think they would want to recede from the government. It would crush their hearts, wouldn't it? Does anybody got anything they want to, before we get ready to show this one? From this? Anything to talk about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what it looks like, the evil might look like it's taking over, but if you stand still, God still has all power.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
That's from the beginning. And the wicked will get paid for what they do, whether it looks like it or not.
Mm-hmm. There's one day.
I really admire the work that
You need to go back to the very beginning of that too, because there's an important thing about the beginning. But don't start it yet. This, as it said, is Governor Bevin. He's the governor of Kentucky. This lady is she describes herself as an independent news person. But as you listen to Governor Bevin's addressing her attitude during his speech, you will find out. He's going to make a comment in here. But basically, this woman is asking, as you're going to find out, about what his view is and what he thinks about guns and schools and safety and thing there. So go ahead and large screen that up. And then go ahead and start. Or turn it up.
I really admire the work that you're doing to help foster children. You've said a number of times that the children's lives is most important. We had a murder a little while ago where 17 people, including many kids, were murdered in their schools. And how do you reconcile the children's lives are most important with the comments you've made to the media about it's naive and premature to talk about gun control, and that it's culture and not guns that is causing these horrible things?
I'll tell you exactly how I reconcile that. First of all, a month ago in Kentucky, we had this very similar situation. Made a very concerted effort to make sure that we removed the media circus from the healing process. So within 24 to 48 hours, you're probably not even aware, most people aren't, that I had a 15-year-old come into a school in Kentucky last month and shoot 16 children at point-blank range, 2 of whom died. A set of twins were both shot and taken to a level 1 trauma center. They lived. This is very real to me. I've sat with these families. You also probably are not aware of the fact that I buried my oldest child. Died under different circumstances, but went to school and didn't come home. She was 17 years old. I know exactly, not exactly, it's not possible to know exactly what another person's going through, but I know exactly what it feels like to bury your oldest child. I know what the impact is on a family. I don't come at this with a sense of sympathy, but empathy. The point that I've made that's been largely misconstrued I'll reaffirm with you and tell you exactly why it comes from, where it comes from. This idea, just as solving this issue is able to be solved with a single law or rule or change, is naive and delusional. And so we shouldn't allow ourselves to entertain naive and delusional thoughts. It is part of a broader construct, just as this issue is. And the point that I made, that I'll reiterate, is that if we think that a part of what we are seeing is not a cultural problem, we're kidding ourselves. And the point that I've made is this: what has shifted in the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Not the percentage of guns that we find in homes. And you can give me a statistic that there's now more guns. Fair enough, I'll submit that that may be true. I'm not going to argue with you. But the reality is there's fewer homes that have guns in them than there were 50 years ago when children didn't walk into schools and shoot themselves and shoot each other. That's a fact. You can confirm that. But I'll tell you this. When I was a kid, kids brought guns to school. Kids brought guns on the school bus. Kids brought guns to school in their own vehicles. They just didn't shoot each other with it. So some things have not changed. What has changed? We as a culture, as a society, and it's very germane to this topic as well, we don't value human life like we did. We remove increasingly respect for the dignity of other people. You look at how rampant pornography is, the degradation and disrespect for women and for human life in general. It is so systemic. People of our age have not been exposed like our children have been. There's not a child in America that hasn't been exposed to pornography, I guarantee you, if they're above the age of 12. That's a fact. It is so systemic, it's horrific. And it desensitizes us at every turn. And so we're desensitized to the value and dignity of human life. We're desensitized through, and this is at the heart of what I said that you seem to take exception with, is that through violent video games, where literally you are encouraged, and you can roll your eyes all you want, man, but I will say this. You explain to me the value of a game that encourages somebody to go back and finish them off, where you get points for kill counts and you slaughter people. We're desensitizing people to the value of life. And we see it through the lyrics and music, and we see it through television shows, we see it through movies. We see it in the fact that the mores of this nation have changed. We see it through the fact that we increasingly want to remove any sense of moral authority from everything. I'll tell you again, we could have 1,000 sidebars, and you can agree or disagree as it relates to what I'm about to say. But in a nation where over the last 40 years, we've aborted 50-something million children, and we have multiple states with medically assisted suicide being provided by doctors. At both ends of the life spectrum, we're losing the value for life that we once historically had. You can say that's good, you can say it's bad, but it's a reality. You couple that with the fact that all these other things are changing, that we're removing any sense of authority. It used to be that you had different levels of authority starting in the home itself. Only a third of children in a recent Pew study say that they have no interaction, for all intents and purposes, with their own parents. When their parents live in the home, they say their parents have no clue what they're even learning in school. There was a study recently in an article that was derived from that and other studies. It was in The Atlantic. I encourage you to look it up, about the impact. And again, you can smirk and you can smile, but as somebody who's an independent consultant, I find it remarkable that you're so smug and you're so disregarding of my opinion, when in fact I'm just trying to have an honest dialogue with you, based on a fair question. But I will say this. Look at this article in The Atlantic. This article in The Atlantic talks about how young people are increasingly becoming suicidal and depressed because of the use of social media and the use of these personal devices and on-screen time. All these are part of a cultural issue. And this cultural issue, if we're not addressing it, we are kidding ourselves, because it also affects this issue we came here to talk about today, which is why these homes are broken, why so many children are finding themselves in government care, which is not the best solution. The government should not be raising our children, period. It just shouldn't. The fact of the matter is we need people in the position like I am And I had this same conversation less than an hour ago with the President of the United States. And I said to him, he should, I should. This whole room was full of cabinet secretaries and governors of other states. Those of us that are in a position of influence and the ability to say something, shame on us if we don't step up and call people to a higher authority. And there will always be those, including many in the media, whoever the messenger is, they're going to find the imperfection in that messenger. So if the messenger says we should do X, Y, Z as it relates to this issue or adoption and foster care, people will say, well, who is this person? They're an imperfect person. Well, so is every one of us. There's not a perfect person in America, but that doesn't mean we don't strive for perfection. There's not a perfectly morally upright person in America. That doesn't mean we don't espouse and aspire to reach for moral higher authority and expect more and demand more of our children. Shame on us if we don't sound the alarm. You want to take any kind of morality and change the mores of a nation, remove any sense of higher responsibility, try to pin it on any one thing and assume the government and a piece of regulation and rule is the solution, and then we're shocked when these things happen. We're kidding ourselves. Yes, sir.
What do you think? Huh? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. For an independent reporter. I loved it. That came, by the way, from Mr. Buddy Williams, who's exiting to turn on the lights now, not leaving us because he doesn't agree with it. But Buddy sent me that earlier today. I had not seen that. Anybody heard about the shooting in Kentucky? No. Because he said he made the news circus, wouldn't let the news circus in and do. All the, almost all the things that you can think of, the protests, all these things that go on. If you notice the protests for Trump, when he became president, you remember all that, the marches and things like that. When did they end? 2 to 3 months later when the people got tired and people wasn't watching the news to see it anymore and the news quit covering it, it ended. Stuff in Charlottesville, when the news quit doing? The recent march, 99% of that, well, 90% of that was just for news media. We talked about it before. Probably maybe 10% of them actually knew what they was marching about. The rest of it just was contacted. Planned Parenthood said, we'll fit the bill. You send your kids and your parents and stuff. And all this other, because it's the show. You take the media away from it, and that you don't see it taking place very much. What he said about the home and about the authority. When I came to Virginia, we came to Virginia in '99. I started youth pastoring in 2000 in Appomattox County. And the first time I went on school grounds, I could not believe, you knew where the Bubbas parked their trucks at because their gun racks was full. Rifles, shotguns, in 2000 on school property. And then I asked about it and they say, yeah, that's because when we get our days off from school to go hunting, we show up, we report and say this is a hunt day, we get to leave and go hunting. I said, you get to do what? He said, we have so many hunt days a year that we can go hunting and be excused absence. Really? Huh? Yeah. So, pretty amazing, I thought. But I do remember, like I said, when I came in 2000 there, that guns were still, in Virginia, were still allowed on school property. And don't remember one shooting that took place during that time. Pretty amazing. But so what do you guys think? Any comments on any of that?
Yeah, never be afraid to stand up for righteousness.
There you go.
Always be bold.
There you go. That's one of the things that I hope that
as we continue on, we did the Truth Project. We're doing this thing about the founding fathers and stuff, and have we stopped to ask ourselves yet why and what we're going to do with what we learned? I hope we do something with it. So, to encourage us to do that, to stand up. So, all right. Anybody got anything else before we get ready? Comments? Anything?
It's funny we didn't even have to see her face to know how she was behaving.
Yeah. Smirk and smile at me, roll your eyes at me. That's one of Bev's favorites. She loves it when people roll her eyes, especially her own kids. All right.
I think the video games are probably the worst culture. Most of my grandkids are girls, but I have walked in on one grandson. It's just like the governor was saying, how many people do you kill? How can you kill them? It's the worst way you can kill them.
Mm-hmm.
It's dramatic. It's got to affect kids.
And not only are you, number one, kill them, how can you kill them, different ways to kill them, but the graphics of displaying the killings is really, really intense and stuff too. I think it's probably as true with video games as it is with much of the other, that the average parent has no idea what their kids are, what kind of games and what's on the games that they're doing. I think I probably said it before when we first back before everybody had their own computers and stuff like that, going way back in the dark ages, when we first got our computer in the house, and we thought we was up to the 18th century when we got our first computer at the house, but we made the rule that it stays out in the dining room area of the house, where there's no walls around, there's no nothing to protect, and so whenever somebody's on there, somebody's always able to see what it is that's on there and things like that. And I remember our kids went crazy. Are you kidding me? We can't take this to the bedroom? Absolutely not. Why not? My friends do, because I don't care about your friends and what they can do. I care about what you do and what you can do with it. So, and that was the idea, so that we would be able to know and to see. We also, if another password came on that computer, if we got into we got into their emails and things like that, we had to have their password. And if we tried to get into their emails and that password no longer worked, it had been changed, and then they were grounded and were not allowed to use. We were the worst terrible parents on the face of the earth, I'm telling you.
Well, I got you beat now, just so you know.
But that's the reason why. Because even back then we knew, before a lot of all this other stuff started happening and things. But I would venture to say that probably the largest percentage of people have no idea what the kids are involved in with the games and different things like that. It's not just pornography anymore, and it's not just it's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, they have their own individual devices. You put their earpieces on, and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
American Family Radio, I haven't heard the last couple of days, but I've been listening to it that much the last 2 days, but they were talking about on Netflix, there's 13 reasons, and it has to do with suicide. And one girl, after watching it over and over and over, it's a mini-series, so I guess it's 13 episodes. She didn't take her life the very same way the girl in the mini-series did. I think that left her arrest. But this girl went into her bathroom and shot herself in the head, killed herself. And she was from a Christian family. And they want people to go on their website, and which I can't remember the particulars now, but I think probably if you did, you could find your way through it to not petition, what's the word I want? Anyway, Netflix about.
To subscribe it?
To drop that series.
Oh, to drop that series, yes.
So that's, because I don't, do they really have a way to tell what age person's viewing these things or not? Or just how many hits they have?
They just do the surveys and things like that to get an idea of.
But it's the viewing audience is picking up the numbers.
Yeah.
And not only that, but there's a lot of profanity, sex, drugs, all of that, all interwoven. And it's just such evil stuff.
Last Thursday night, the church department hosted an event that was not very well attended here at the community center. Hidden in plain view. And the presenters, one was a lieutenant, the other was a master sergeant, whatever that is. And they had gone in to the community center probably at least an hour before, and they had set up a young person, teenager's room, bed, chest of drawers, workstation, other things you see in a room, and you can go in and look and see, in other words, what is alerting you. And then they had a video, and most of the stuff was not something that would attract your attention. But the video then showed what the stuff was, what it meant. Some of the examples were, sometimes you'll see kids that have, in their room, they've taken used liquor bottles and put artificial flowers in them. You don't think, what is it? Well, this means if they have friends over, this means I have this, if it's a vodka bottle, it means I have this in the house, I can get to it, it's accessible, it's here. A lot of spray cans, which, I guess, inhaling the propellant, whatever it is. Coca-Cola cans, it was like Coca-Cola cans, and one of the hole, you unscrew the top, and that's a place to store your drug, marijuana, whatever. A watch, much like, not mine, but my son wears it. I told him if he ever fell in the river, he'd drown. But anyway, it really kept time. But if you unscrewed it, it was a mini grinder. You could grind up pills, you could grind up marijuana, whatever it is, for grinding. Things that, just looking at it, you don't have much the books they're reading, even the t-shirts, surprised me, they had some t-shirts spread out on the bed, and they were indicators. Doesn't mean they're involved with it, but it's a possible indicator. It was a very good.
For a red flag.
It was only, I think it was 8 of us there. I guess it wasn't well advertised. It was posted on the bulletin board, but I guess it wasn't well advertised.
I don't remember hearing, but did you send me a thing on it? Did you send me information on it?
No,
I don't remember.
Actually, I came on it very late, and I think it was on Facebook. I'm not sure.
That's why I didn't get it.
But like the girls' bracelets, you'll see a lot of them wearing these real cheap colored plastic bracelets. This indicates what they're willing to do sexually. Kiss, intercourse, oral sex, whatever. And the different colors. And they actually have a chart. And supposedly, if a boy in the hallway grabs one and breaks it, that means And they covered the full gamut, the suicide, they covered the different drinks. Others, they had a graphic that one Coke equals one Coke, okay? And then the power drinks that you can get equals 5 Cokes. And then they went on down to different things that you can drink. The real interesting one, they put down the bottom, and then instead of just the total number of Cokes that it is equated to, they put the Coke cans up like one at a time. It was a Starbucks star fee, 12 and a half Cokes, one Starbucks coffee.
It's 12 and a half Cokes.
Yeah, I'll keep my eye out if they present it anywhere else. They will present it to church groups or anybody else that's I don't know actually who arranged for it here. I assumed it was a community center, but if they did, they certainly would not have passed.
Well, I knew that a lot of them had their own, we call it dialects, languages, and stuff like that. But that's some of the, the bracelets and the flower thing and stuff like that. I hadn't heard anything about that as far as being. So.
You know what that tells me? That these are the last days, like the Bible said. It's like the days of Noah, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yes, it is. Getting, if it ain't, it's getting very, very close. But, all right. Anybody else? Anything? All right, buddy. You want to close this in prayer? Welcome back, by the way. You weren't here last week, so welcome back.
It was not that here. Heavenly Father, again, we're thankful to be able to come here and listen to the Martin. We're thankful for his studies and his information and his ability to convey it. We also pray that you who do a church here, the initiative to go out and take this to heart, try to in our own individual ways to change the morals, mores, ethics of our society. It's just a small group here at work or our neighborhood. We also ask that you answer the prayers for those that are sick within the congregation, and also if they have any financial problems or emotional problems, that you be with them, grant them peace and comfort in Jesus' name. Amen.
One of the other things that I was going to mention before that I forgot was it's very, very alarming the things that people will allow to happen and to do in order to continue to keep the thing, in order for the things that they want. For example, he talked about in here about the biggest trend that we've seen, well, he didn't talk about here, but he talked about government raising children and things like that. And that has been one of the biggest changes probably in the last 20 years as anything else. And the main reason that is so big is that then parents have time to go out and do different things that they want to do. And so they're willing to sacrifice their children to be able to continue to do the things that they wanted to do, that they haven't been able to do since they had children or can't do as much, so that they can still do it. They'll give their children away to any kind of different organization, things like that, that is done. And that's not good. So.
If I could ask for prayer over it, Sister Diane. Our former pastor, down in Carolina, they felt called to do foster care. And about a year and a half ago, they got a call to pick up a baby from the hospital here in Bedford. And so she went and got in. Mom and Dad, and they tried to find Mom and Dad, couldn't find them. So they had a verbal, termination of rights, but there's like a 30-day window, which is the 16th of this month. So if you could just be praying for baby, his name is David Hunter, but they're renaming him Jax. That, mom and dad don't wait till the 11th hour to then try and start the process. It'll get drawn out for who knows how long. This is his family that he's been with since birth. He's about 16 months old now, so you guys can be praying for him because it's coming down to the wire where, they would be able to then pursue adoption once rights are officially